Let us hear these words as written in Luke chapter 13, verses 6 through 9 in the NRSVUE translation. Then he told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and found none. So he said to the man working in the vineyard, "See here, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and still I find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil?" He replied, "Sir, let it alone for 1 more year, until I dig around it, put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good. If not, you can cut it down."
So my name is Paul, and I think my greatest credential for standing before you this morning is that I'm a good friend of Patty's. That's how you get recruited for this work. It's all about relationship, and I'm glad to be with you this morning. I hope to get to know some of you a little bit better. I have some good friends here, and even some good friends on your online feed this morning. Cynthia Beatty may be there, and I'll just say hi to her. Her husband, Bill Beatty, and I served as pastors alongside each other for quite a number of years during my Methodist period. I was a Methodist pastor for quite a number of years and enjoyed that. But I've been all around the theological map. I grew up Roman Catholic. I pastored non-denominational churches in the 70s into the early 80s. Then I became a Methodist pastor and worked with them for a long time. And finally came to join the United Church of Christ, where I was ordained almost 20 years ago now in that denomination. So it's been a long and interesting journey, and I've stopped at a lot of the wonderful resorts along the way. And as this is a church that is a community church and represents a variety of traditions, I'm pleased to be here because I think that you recognize that we are all in this thing together when we come together. Well, I like this passage of Scripture this morning, and I want to just talk about the fact that I would never choose it on my own, because Jesus is represented in this parable as the landowner. So he's the person in power, and he says, cut down that tree. It's wasting our time. That's a terrible thing to imagine anyone in Jesus' position saying. I'm done with this. It's wasting space. Let's give that space to someone more worthwhile, something more productive. So what are we seeing in this story that enables us to find grace in it, other than in the wonderful character of that gardener who is not the landowner, but actually persuades the landowner to let this little tree have more time? Well, the rationale behind having a complicated answer to the question is that parables are not straightforward. Parables are what I like to call, since it's spring, I'll use a baseball analogy, they are high pop-ups. When the words of a parable are sent out to us, the ball is hit and it climbs so high that most good players have the chance to set up and camp out under where the answer is going to come some time from now. Occasionally, however, we lose the ball in the sun. Have you heard that expression? That it goes up there and it's going to come down. Gravity is fairly inevitable. I don't think there are any good cures for gravity. The ball will come down, but it may not come down where you expected. It may have a different solution, a different result. Parables are the same word that gives us parabola, or a long arc in English. So if we try to think of parables as straightforward stories, we miss the incredible depth and variety that is in them, and the fact that the alternate meaning is actually more important than what the words tell us. Waiting for it and allowing the light to dawn on us is what a parable is all about. The prodigal son, for example, is not a story about family relationships as much as it is about grace and forgiveness, about allowing second chances. And guess what? Today's parable is not about fruit, not even figs, which are wonderful and delightful in their own aside. Did you know a fig is the only fruit tree, that doesn't blossom into flowers first before the fruit comes? And that actually the seeds inside the fruit are the flowers. The blossoms are the seeds inside, and it's thought by some that that's why the seeds of figs are so delicious and juicy, is because they are actually the blossoms. They blossom inside the shell of the fruit, and we enjoy the flower in a completely different way than any other seeded fruit that we could find. So figs are cool, but the parable's not about figs. The parable's not about gardening either, even though we could say that the gardener wasn't being just kind, he was just putting off a landowner. Because you see, the parable tells us that the fig tree had grown for 3 years and didn't bear fruit. But nature tells us that figs don't always blossom and turn into fruit by the 3rd year. Sometimes it takes as many as 5. And what the gardener was simply asking the landowner to do was to allow something to grow. Give it time. This is not the final exam yet, the 3rd season. Could be the 4th season, could be even the 5th. But he's giving the fruit tree the opportunity to bloom when it was ready, instead of assuming that every fruit will blossom at the same age. Are some of you parents? Oh my goodness, there are hands up. This is the right audience. You know about children. Did all of your children grow to the same height and same maturity at the same age? Mine sure didn't. I'm not going to say which one did differently than the others, but they were all unique. We had 3 children, and we sometimes said we had one of each kind because they each were at their own style and their own pace, and they each came to adult maturity at different times in their lives. And we even have a name for the difference, because there are children and figs that grow smoothly from birth to maturity to fruitfulness at a steady pace. And then there are others who experience these unusual spurts where growth happens all of a sudden and height changes. I know that personally because in the 5th grade, I was the smallest, shortest boy in my class. By the 8th grade, I was one of the tallest. I got to 6 feet in the 8th grade, but I was barely 5 feet in the 5th grade. Now, I've lost some of those inches as decades have piled onto my shoulders, and the weight of all those years holds me down. I'm no longer 6 feet. Some of you may recognize that happens too. But in this parable, we want to explore the fact that growing pains is a real phenomenon. And even in 10 trees planted from the seeds of the same fruit, some of those trees may grow quickly, some of them may grow slowly, and unfortunately, some may not seem to grow at all. But the gardener invites us into letting growth find its own pace, not telling us what has to happen or what should have happened by now. And so what we're really being invited to consider is that all of us need to find our own time, our own pace, our own speed of coming to get whatever it is God has called us to get. In this story, we're being asked to think about what grace would offer. I love the fact that when you gather, you remind each other that all of us are welcome and affirmed and accepted and included in this space. I love that we can know that this is a place where I can grow at my own pace, which may not be your pace. I love that this is a place that allows us to be ourselves. We each bring different gifts to the picnic. And if everybody only brought hamburger buns, it would be a boring picnic. Someone's got to bring desserts to enjoy for after. Someone's got to bring an entree. Somebody's got to bring those salads that you have to have, or it's not a picnic. Sides and main dishes. Somebody should probably bring plates and utensils. Someone should bring something to drink. In other words, when enough of us each follow our inclination, we provide the completeness of a circle. If we're all expected to do one thing and to have it done at the right time, the same time, that's not very interesting. We are not the same. Just as those fig trees in today's story are not the same. Some of them grew faster than others. One of them, unfortunately, didn't grow fast enough to satisfy someone looking at the story. One of the blessings of calling a gathering an affirming gathering is recognizing that we know that we are not all the same. And it's okay that the place you are in may not be the place that I am in. It may not even be the place all of us could be in. But we're all on that journey together. Next year, things may look different. Last year, they certainly looked different than they do right now. And time is everything. I just want to say that I've been wrestling with this because we had some spectacular spring weather a week to 2 weeks ago. One of the things that happened was all of the snow in my yard, front and back, all disappeared in a matter of days. Green shoots began to pop up from the ground. Earlier this week, some of those green shoots got to be about this tall, and they're a daffodil patch we have. And the yellow blossoms about to burst open are all visible at the tops of about 20 of those stalks in one patch. And then it was 25 degrees yesterday morning, and 27 this morning. These are not scorching temperatures. And I'm afraid for the flowers who were all ready to be fruitful in their way this week and have to wait another day. And they even got encouraged by the fact that it went from 20 in the 20s in the morning yesterday to 58 degrees at 5 o'clock. That's backwards somehow. And so they keep getting surprised by whoever's got their thumb on the thermostat. Time is everything. Now, one of the things I want to tie in for us all as we think about this is your Lenten story invites us to imagine the space between rest and growth. And I want to suggest that one of the profound metaphors that works for the space between rest and growth is growing pains. And growing pains occupy such a wide variety of descriptions. They remind us that sometimes the growing pain is something grew too fast and everything is pulled out of kilter and has to settle back. Sometimes our growing pain is that growth doesn't happen visibly enough to assure us that all is well. And sometimes we all move along in process together and surprise ourselves to say a year later, look how far we've come. But parables, one of those things I want you to hold, if nothing else, is that we can completely miss them even when we understand every word of the story. One of the ways we have assurance that this is so is that many of the parables feature an interesting afterword where some of the disciples tug on Jesus' arm and said, "What were you talking about? We don't get it. Could you explain that story to us?" And he'll say, "Well, this is that, and that means this." And if you hold the story together, you'll probably get to this kind of a conclusion. And they look at him, and I can see their faces, kind of puzzled, and say, "Okay." Because sometimes it's not clear. But you know what is true? 2,000 years later, we're still reading those parables. We're still thinking about those illustrations Jesus gave for things that we cannot see and probably don't understand, so that we'll puzzle it out together today. There was a draw, a magnetism to those stories that invite us to keep thinking about them, even when it's clear sometimes we just don't understand them. Why is that landowner being so mean that he wants to pull up a poor fig tree? He wasn't. It's not history, it's parable. So I hope that we can all find our way into the grace of letting each of us follow the pace and direction of our own journeys, so that we can arrive at the place of being all that God calls us to be, even though it may not look like anyone else's journey. You're welcome. Blessings and amen.